The ProACT Know-How, brought to you by ProACT.
Hi, this is ProACT Sam. Welcome to this week's Living and Working Abroad vlog. We are on a bit of a restart this week. It's coming up to Easter, and the great thing about Easter is there's no Brexit talk because everybody has gone to lie down in a dark room and recover. So Easter is the time of renewal and looking forward to the future as we enter into the last series of what should be a busy year for expats and in planning their way forward for EU Brexit as it's now been reset for the rest of the year. So what I want to do first is just go through 10 dates for your diary for this year that expats need to look at to consider what the new way forward is. So the first date is the 31st of October, the opposite end of spring, the end of autumn, Halloween, the night the demons and the world ends. But that was what was predicted on the 12th of April and the 29th of March. If we had Brexit without no deal, it didn't. The world carried on. There's far more worse disasters than we've seen as that, such as on the 15th of April when the Notre Dame Cathedral burned down. What sort of impact will that have on the EU and Europe and an attitude to world leaders when this iconic world symbol goes through this trauma? So it may help in the renewal. The next date that we want to look at is the 23rd of June. Now the 23rd of June is a big anniversary for many reasons, and one of the main ones that we're looking at is that it's the third anniversary of the EU Brexit referendum in the UK. So what we can do is expect a lot of noise and a lot of positions to be taken with people with their different vested interest to remain, to leave, to stay, to go, to this deal, to that deal, all which is completely irrelevant in the great scheme of things. But the two extremes and the big battles should happen around the 23rd of June. The date before that to look at is the 31st of May. Although Brexit Date had been set for the 31st of October with or without a deal, the 31st of June is actually also a Brexit date. The UK will be kicked out of the EU on the 31st of May if there's the existing withdrawal treaty is not accepted, or and if the UK don't enter into elections for European members of Parliament. So if the UK don't participate in and elect members of the EU Parliament 3 years after having a referendum saying that they wanted to leave the EU, then the UK will be kicked out of the EU on the 31st of May without a deal, unless they've agreed the withdrawal treaty that's already been put in place, and they can agree that up to the 11th hour of the 31st of May, but otherwise it's leaving without a deal. So let's have a look at the next date, which is the week before that, 23rd of May. On the 23rd of May, that's when the elections start for EU MEPs between the 23rd and the 26th. So by the 27th of May, we could have some new MPs representing the UK as members of Parliament in the EU. Now the UK have given undertakings that UK will not disrupt Parliament process. The EU processes, they won't be a negative member of the EU during this extended transition period towards Brexit. But how about it? If MEPs are elected from the UK, what an election that will be, where it will be a people's vote to elect members of the European Parliament, and it will bring out the two sides, the Remain, the Stay, and the in-between, and it will polarise opinions, I believe, if it gets that far, and could lead to some very hardline Brexiteers getting into the into the European Parliament that could then disrupt that once that starts sitting into June and July. So 23rd of May is an interesting time for the big battles and the big people's vote towards referendum that should hopefully provide some influence to our friends in the UK Parliament to come together to coalesce around an agreement with terms that the EU could agree on in their withdrawal treaty. So that would be interesting. It's also interesting to note that the end of the Game of Thrones series is that week as well. So there'll be some really big battles, and as they say in Game of Thrones, all men must die. So who will be left standing? We will see. Will it be Theresa May, or will she survive, or will she be gone by then? Will there be new leaders of political parties in the UK, or will there be a new general election in the UK? Who's to say? Because the next date to look out for is the 2nd of May. Only 3 weeks away, a week after Easter, it's the local council elections in the UK. Now, not such a big political event in the UK traditionally, but an opportunity for people in the UK to vote and send a signal to the political leaders about whether they should leave or not leave. Part of the problem is that generally the MPs in the UK Parliament don't agree with the result of the referendum, and they're trying to get a different outcome, complicated by the fact that many MPs appear not to understand the process. The EU is very clear about this, is that the EU will not agree a withdrawal treaty, will not agree a trade treaty until the withdrawal treaty goes ahead. So unless that's signed, they cannot negotiate with a member a new trade deal. So all these calls for trade deals to be agreed, they can't work because the EU say these are our red lines and this is what we're not going to move on. So between the 12th of April, when the fudge was extended, there's no more summit meetings of the EU now after the 10th of April. The guidelines have been set. Many things are going to change going forward after spring. There's a new EU Commission coming in, be a new EU President. There'll be new European MEPs in place. There could be new UK leaders in place. And so how will this all affect what the status quo will be? Will the public votes in the UK for the local elections and possibly the European elections galvanise opinion? The one last date that expats need to consider is the 1st of any month. So if the British parliamentarians voted to accept the EU's withdrawal treaty as it stands today, then the 1st of next month, the 1st of May, they could leave the EU. And that would be the 1st of any month through May to October. So Brexit might just be a few weeks away. And so what expats must do is consider and plan ahead within the margins. The EU have said all along, this is the withdrawal treaty, we're not changing it. And yet they have moved. They've moved twice now, a little bit and then a lot, because they want to deal with the UK. The UK want to deal so that they haven't got the conviction or the numbers to go through on a no-deal basis. So this is where the status quo is. What is the deal that is satisfactory to everybody? So the EU have moved, and they, despite what they say, they do have to amend the withdrawal treaty. Why? Because at the very least it says in the withdrawal treaty that the Brexit date is the 29th of March in 3 places. So they have to amend the withdrawal treaty. So why can't they amend it to accommodate some of the demands, the political demands from the UK about the sovereignty of the country and its border? So these are issues to look out for. So Brexit could happen as soon as the UK Parliament accepts a withdrawal treaty. There could be many battles along the way in the new series of dates going through to the 31st of October. And what expats can do now is they've got a second chance to plan ahead. So they can consider their residency situation, what they need to do to secure their residency in their expat country abroad. EU citizens living in the UK, they can now apply for the UK settled status, settled scheme status. That's opened on the 30th of March as planned, despite Brexit not going ahead. So EU citizens can now secure a lifetime of residency in the UK for themselves and their family. Because the UK is in until it's out, it's in the EU until it's out of the EU, then the UK citizens can still relocate overseas, and EU expats can relocate to the UK right up until Brexit Day. So if Brexit Day was the 31st of October, then expats now have got to consider that if they want to relocate, they could relocate now to their new location and also secure their residency rights for themselves and their business. So a business might need a reorganisation to have a branch office, or it might need a subsidiary business set up in the UK or in a country like Cyprus or the EU. So these are the things that businesses should plan now, knowing what we know. We know that governments have largely planned for a no-deal Brexit. They will progress, and that might allow the no-deal scenario to be more acceptable in the future. But it's all the more point for a business to prepare itself to enable it to carry on its trade. If a business is not doing work cross borders, that's irrelevant. But if you are doing cross-border work, then plan ahead for your business to be able to continue to operate. On an individual basis, you've got issues like driving licenses, medical cards, social insurance. What do you need to do to organise that so that you can continue to live and work in your expat country within the EU, whether it's the UK, Cyprus or elsewhere? These things need to go on, and there's easier ways or different ways that an EU citizen can upgrade and secure their long-term future under these arrangements than when after Brexit, especially if there's no deal. So, for example, Cyprus has guaranteed to treat UK citizens the same after Brexit. However, there's no social insurance agreement in place, there's no driving licence agreement in place, so pension and benefit rights, working rights, you might have to retake a driving test if you don't make your arrangements now. So the different options you've got, and those are there to be chosen right now. And the other thing that an expat can consider in the longer term is what they want to get out of their investment overseas. So if you're investing in property or a business or just a lifestyle overseas, how is the tax situation? How is the cross-border situation? How is the treatment of wills and trusts and probates and inheritance going to be impacted by the changing laws? The EU common law on how estates are managed and the exchange of information internationally between banks means that monies can be blocked in a foreign location, and probates can take years to be settled at great expense, especially in a country like Cyprus. By planning ahead and putting property, business and investment assets in a secure environment that's protected in advance of loss of health or death, then or change of the law, then the business and the family can protect itself going forward. So all of these things are available. We've got a few more months now before the things change. The world won't come to an end on Halloween's Day. With the start of this renewal, have a happy Easter, enjoy that. Go along to our website at ProACTpartnership.com, where you'll find lots of further information and updates on EU Brexit for expats, but also what expats should be doing anyway to protect their family and their business and their property and their pensions overseas. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.
The ProACT Know-How, brought to you by ProACT.